She felt the bond sever. It was not a clean cut, but a jagged tear, a spiritual evisceration that ripped the breath from her lungs and sent her collapsing to the cold stone. The laughter of the pack, high, cruel, and echoing in the great hall, was a physical blow. Alara gasped, clutching her chest, the agonizing phantom limb pain of a mate bond shattering before it had even formed. Above her, Alpha Kale, his face a mask of aristocratic disgust, brushed a piece of dust from his ceremonial black tunic. He hadn't just rejected her, he had annihilated her. Wait! Before the next revelation unfolds, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. A wolfless Omega, Kale's voice boomed, slicing through her pain. The moon goddess insults me. She pairs me with kitchen filth. He kicked her, not hard, but with the dismissive contempt one would show a dog. Get her out. The scent of her weakness offends me. Alara curled into herself, her threadbare linen dress, saved for a year for this night, now soiled with spilled wine and shame. She was 19, and her life, which had already been a valley of shadows, had just fallen off a cliff. She was Alara, the lowest of the low, the orphan who scrubbed pots, and for 3 blissful, terrifying minutes, she had been the fated mate of the most powerful alpha in the territory. Hands, rough and unsympathetic, grabbed her arms. It was Bryn and Marcus, Kale's betas. They dragged her backward, her worn shoes scraping grooves in the polished floor. She kept her head down, tears blurring the glittering faces of the pack members. They weren't just watching, they were preening, their relief palpable that they had not been the ones found lacking. Wolfless, someone hissed. Barren, a broken link in the chain. The whispers followed her, sharp as knives, burying themselves in her back. She was a failure, a genetic dead end, an embarrassment to the pristine lineage of the Silvermoon Pack. They didn't just escort her to the edge of the pack house. They dragged her through the village square, past the bonfires lit for the choosing celebration, and threw her onto the dirt path that led to the wilderness. Alpha's decree, rat. Bryn sneered, his wolf flashing in his eyes. Rejected, unmated, unpacked. You have until moonset to be off Silvermoon land. If you're found, you're sport for the trackers. Moonset was perhaps an hour away. He tossed a small, stale loaf of bread at her feet. It was a final, cruel mockery of the pack's law to provide for the exiled. Alara didn't move until their heavy footsteps faded. Then the shaking started. It wasn't just fear. The rejection was a poison. Her skin felt like it was burning from the inside out. The invisible thread that had sung to life, connecting her to Kale, was now thrashing, dying, and lashing her spirit with its death throes. She had no wolf, no inner strength to fight this. All she had was a hollow, aching void where a mate, a purpose, and a small, flickering hope had briefly lived. She pushed herself up. Her knees were raw, bleeding into the dirt. She had to run. But where? To the east, where the human lands, where shifters were hunted. To the south, the ocean. To the west, rival packs who would tear a lone, rejected Omega apart. That left north, the blighted lands. A territory so poisoned by an ancient war that no pack wolf dared enter it. A place of twisted trees, toxic rivers, and rumors of monsters that madness had birthed. They called it the Forbidden Kingdom. And its ruler, the story went, was Riker, the Shadow Alpha, the monster who had been exiled a decade ago for murder and dark magic. Ilara looked back at the warm lights of the pack house, a place that had never been her home, and then to the suffocating darkness of the northern forest. One offered certain death by her own people. The other offered a potential, unknown end. With a sob that tore from her raw throat, Ilara grabbed the stale bread and ran north, toward the kingdom of the exiled. The forest changed almost immediately. The tall, proud silver pines of the Silver Moon territory gave way to gnarled, leafless oaks that clawed at the sky. The air grew cold, carrying a metallic tang that stung her nose. She ran until her lungs were fire, and the spiritual agony of the rejection made her stumble. Every step was a fresh wave of nausea. The bond wasn't just broken, it was infected. Kale's disgust had tainted the severance. It felt like acid eating away at her soul, and the sickness was physical. A wave of dizziness crashed over her, and she fell, vomiting the meager contents of her stomach onto the dead leaves. She was cold, so cold. The rejection was stealing her body heat. She pushed herself onward, driven by the primal fear of Bryn's threat, sport for the trackers. She knew what that meant. They wouldn't kill her quickly. They would hunt her, run her to ground, and... She stumbled for what felt like hours, the moon climbing high, mocking her. The forest here was not just dead, it was wrong. The shadows seemed to move, to writhe, with a life of their own. She tripped over a root that looked unsettlingly like a grasping hand. The air was thick, and the silence was absolute. No birds, no insects, just the frantic pounding of her own heart. She fell, skidding down a muddy embankment and landing hard in a patch of stinging nettles. The pain was distant. All she felt was the cold. She was so cold. "Please," she whispered to the uncaring, absent moon. "Please, just let it be fast." She had no wolf to keep her warm, no mate to call for. She was nothing. A twig snapped. Ilara froze. It wasn't a deer. It was heavy. 2 pinpricks of yellow light glowed in the oppressive dark, low to the ground. A rogue, a feral wolf, drawn by the scent of her weakness and despair. It stalked out of the brush, its fur matted, saliva dripping from its jaws. It was massive, scarred, and its eyes held no reason, only hunger. This was the end Bryn had promised her. Sport. Ilara fumbled for a rock, a stick, anything. Her hand closed around a sharp piece of flint. The wolf lunged. She screamed, a thin, useless sound, and threw the rock. It bounced harmlessly off the creature's thick skull. Then a blur of motion, silent as the grave, slammed into the rogue from the side. It was not a sound, but a void in the sound. Ilara scrambled back, pressing herself against the mud wall. A second shape, larger than the rogue, black as pitch, was upon it. There was a terrible, wet sound of tearing, a choked-off yelp, and the rogue's body was thrown 20 feet, landing in a crumpled heap. The victor stood in the faint moonlight, its head raised, sniffing the air. It was a wolf, but larger than any she had ever seen. Its fur seemed to drink the light, and its eyes were not yellow, but a piercing, intelligent ice blue. The massive wolf turned its head, and its gaze pinned her. Ilara stopped breathing. This was no rogue. This was power. This was the monster from the stories. The wolf took a step toward her, and then another. It did not stalk. It walked with a deliberate, lethal grace. As it drew closer, the air around it seemed to shimmer. The lines of the wolf blurred, bones cracked and shifted, and the creature rose. It was a man. He was tall, broader than Kael, and draped in rough-spun black furs. Scars marked his face, one trailing down from his temple across his eye, which remained that piercing blue, and disappearing into a rugged black beard. He was the most terrifying and beautiful man she had ever seen. And he was watching her with an intensity that stripped her bare. "A silver moon pup," his voice rumbled, rough as gravel. "Lost or thrown away?" Ilara couldn't speak. She could only tremble. He took another step, crouching down to her level. He was close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from him, a stark contrast to the deathly cold of her rejection. He tilted his head. "You smell broken." He reached out a hand. Ilara flinched violently. He paused, his gaze softening by a fraction. "I am not Kull," he said, and the way he spoke the name, like acid on his tongue, sent a jolt through her. "He did this to you." It wasn't a question. His gaze flickered to the faint, dying shimmer of the broken bond that only shifters could see. He rejected his mate. I'm wolfless," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. "I'm nothing." The man's lips quirked in a smile that held no humor. Wolfless. He sniffed the air again, his eyes narrowing. No, not wolfless. Waiting. He held out his hand again. It was calloused, scarred, and large enough to swallow hers, but it was steady. "He cast you into the blighted lands. He's a fool. My lands." You're him," she managed, her teeth chattering. "Riker, the Shadow Alpha." "I am Riker," he confirmed, "and this is my kingdom." He nodded toward the dark forest behind him. "And in my kingdom, we do not discard things just because they are broken. We find a new purpose for them." He stood, towering over her. "Can you walk?" Ilara tried. She put her palms flat on the mud and tried to push herself up, but the rejection sickness, which had been a cold ache, now surged into a raging fever. The world tilted violently. She cried out, clutching her stomach as the invisible claws tore at her. "It hurts," she whimpered, tears of sheer agony freezing on her cheeks. "Make it stop." Riker cursed, a low, guttural sound. Before she could react, he scooped her into his arms. It was effortless. He held her against his broad, fur-covered chest. She was so light, and he was so solid, a fortress of warmth and muscle. "He did the full rejection right," Riker observed, his voice dark with a sudden cold fury. "On an unshifted Omega. He didn't just break the bond, he tried to shatter your soul." He began to walk, not back towards Silvermoon, but deeper into the blighted lands, moving with a speed and silence that was inhuman. Where are you taking me?" she whispered, her face pressed against the rough fur. "Home," he replied. "I'm taking you to Grimmire, and we're going to see if we can save what's left of you." The journey was a fever dream. Ilara drifted in and out of consciousness, anchored only by the steady, powerful beat of Riker's heart and the impossible warmth of his body. At one point, she was dimly aware of him stopping. A low growl rumbled in his chest. She cracked her eyes open and saw more shapes in the darkness, creatures of shadow and twisted limbs with too many eyes. They were Blightspawn, the monsters of the poisoned wood. Riker didn't slow. He just pushed through them, and a wave of pure, cold darkness radiated from him, sending the creatures scattering back into the shadows. He was a monster, yes, but he was their monster. She must have passed out again, because when she next awoke, they were standing before a sheer cliff face. Riker whistled, a low two-note sound that echoed strangely. A section of the rock, covered in dead vines, slid aside, revealing a dark tunnel lit by glowing blue moss. As he carried her inside, she saw faces, pale, scarred, and wary, peering from alcoves in the rock. The dispossessed, the exiled. This wasn't just a cave, it was a hidden fortress. He didn't stop until he reached a large, warmer cavern. Ilara had a fleeting impression of dried herbs, a crackling fire, and an old woman's face before the darkness finally claimed her completely. Ilara awoke to the smell of dried herbs and roasting meat. She was lying on a soft cot covered in thick, warm pelts. The room was not a room, but a cavern, the stone walls lit by the gentle glow of phosphorescent moss. A small fire crackled in a stone hearth, and an old woman, her face a road map of wrinkles, was stirring a pot. "Awake, child? Good." The woman's voice was thin but strong. "Drink this." She ladled a dark, steaming broth into a wooden bowl and held it out. Ilara sat up, her body aching, but the terrible, tearing sickness had receded. It was still there, a cold rock in her stomach, but it wasn't actively trying to kill her. She took the bowl, her hands shaking, and drank. The broth was rich, tasting of mushrooms and iron, and warmth spread through her limbs. "Where am I?" "Grimire, the deep wood hold." The old woman smiled. "My name is Lena. I am the healer here. Riker, the Alpha, he brought you. Dropped you on my cot like a drowned kitten," Lena said, her eyes twinkling. "Said fix her. Alphas, no manners." Ilara looked down at herself. Her torn, filthy dress was gone. She was wearing a simple, soft-spun tunic. Someone had cleaned the mud and blood from her knees. He saved me. From a rogue. "He saved you from more than that," Lena said, her expression turning serious. "The Alpha of Silvermoon, Kale." She spat the name. "His rejection was poisoned with malice. He wanted you to die, child, to break apart so completely you couldn't even pass to the moon's embrace." Ilara's blood ran cold. She had known he was cruel, but not that cruel. I don't understand. Why?" "Because you are his fated mate," Lena said, sitting on a stool, "and your presence, even broken, would have been a constant reminder of his failure, his weakness. He could not risk you staying. He could not risk another Alpha claiming you." "Claim me?" Ilara laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Who would claim a wolfless Omega, a reject?" Lena's gaze was sharp. "You are not wolfless. I've tended to shifters for 70 winters, girl. I know the scent of a wolf. Yours is just deep, asleep, suppressed." That pack of his, all glitter and granite, they fear anything they cannot control. They probably starved your wolf before it could even be born. Lena took the empty bowl from her. "The bond sickness. It's not just a spiritual wound, child. Kyle's malice is a toxin. It's still in you. It's trying to rot your soul from the inside." Can you fix it?" Ilara whispered, the cold dread returning. "I can cleanse the wound," Lena said, "but fixing it? That's up to you. The scar will always be there." She bustled over to her hearth and returned with a smoking bundle of herbs. "Breathe this. It will show you the truth of the damage." Ilara inhaled the pungent smoke, and the world dissolved. She was floating, and she could see the bond. It was a thick, black, rotting cord of energy still attached to her, pulsing with Kyle's cold disgust. It was vile. She cried out, recoiling even in the vision. "Now you see," Lena's voice echoed. "Now you know what you are fighting." The vision faded, leaving Ilara shaking but resolute. "I'll fight it." The curtain of hides that served as a door was pushed aside, and Riker entered. He filled the space, his presence a tangible weight. He had shed his outer furs, and he wore simple black breeches and a leather tunic. He nodded to Lena, then fixed his ice-blue eyes on Alara. "You're clean." It was an observation, blunt and simple. "Thank you, my lord," Alara stammered, scrambling to her feet. The term alpha felt wrong. He was not her alpha. "I am not your lord," he growled. "I am Riker. Here, you earn your keep or you leave. Lena says you're strong enough." I can work," Alara said quickly, her heart pounding. "I worked in the kitchens. I can scrub, I can cook, I can mend." "We have cooks," Riker said, cutting her off. He walked closer, circling her slowly, like he was assessing livestock. It should have been humiliating, but it wasn't. Kyle's gaze had been about possession. Riker's was about utility. "Lena," he said, not looking away from Alara. "Her scent. The one under the rejection filth. You smell it?" Lena stood and came closer, sniffing the air around Alara's head. Alara held perfectly still. "Yes," Lena breathed, her eyes widening. "Moon-touched. Faint, but sweet, like new roots." "What does that mean?" Alara asked, terrified. Riker ignored her, his gaze locked with Lena's. "Kale is a fool," Riker said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "He's the biggest, most arrogant, blind fool the goddess ever spat upon this earth." "What is wrong with me?" Alara cried, her panic rising. Riker finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Nothing is wrong with you, girl. Everything is wrong with him." He turned. "Get her fed. Give her real clothes. I'm putting her in the lower gardens." "The gardens?" Lena protested. "Riker, that's back-breaking work. And Finn is on watch there. He'll eat her alive." "Finn will do as he's told," Riker said. "She smells like roots. Let's see if she can make anything grow in this cursed rock." He pushed the curtain aside and was gone. Lena sighed, turning back to Alara. "Well, you heard the man. The gardens it is. At least it's quiet. And Finn, just stay out of his way. His scars are newer than most. He was one of Kale's trackers. He refused an order to hunt a runaway mother and pup, so Kale's father had him marked, then cast out." Lena gave her a set of practical clothes: dark breeches, a warm tunic, and sturdy boots. The gardens were in a vast lower cavern, lit by a cluster of massive glowing crystals that mimicked sunlight. The air was warm and humid, but the ground was hard, rocky soil, dotted with patches of withered, struggling plants. A young man, barely older than Alara, was hacking at a patch of stubborn roots with a pickaxe. He was lean, wiry, and a terrible, jagged scar ran from his hairline to his jaw, pulling one side of his mouth into a permanent sneer. This had to be Finn. He stopped when she approached, his eyes narrowing. "Lost, little rat?" "Riker sent me," Alara said, trying to keep her voice steady. He said to work in the gardens." Finn laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Did he now? The great Alpha finds a new toy, and he sends it here, to the dirt?" He stalked over to her, his movements feral. He was a shifter, his wolf barely contained. "What's your story? Cast out? Run away?" "I was rejected," Alara said, lifting her chin. Finn's sneer faltered, his gaze flickering with something. Pity? Or perhaps just recognition? "Rejected, eh? We're all rejects here." He gestured to the dying plants. "Welcome to the grand task, trying to grow food in the blighted lands. This place, this grim mire, it's a fortress, but it's sterile. The land is as broken as we are. Riker thinks we can will it to live. He's as mad as his father was." He gestured to a patch of dry, cracked earth. "This was supposed to be potatoes. We've had three 3 in a month. We're starving, little rat. And he sends you? He threw a small hand trowel at her feet. Fine. You want to work? Work. Try not to die. Alara picked up the trowel. She knelt by a patch of earth where small, pale carrots were struggling to survive. The soil was dry, compacted, and felt dead. She remembered what Lena had said. You smell like roots. She closed her eyes, remembering the kitchens, the smell of fresh herbs, the feel of new potatoes in her hands. She pushed her fingers into the soil. It was cold. She thought of the warmth of Lena's broth, the impossible heat of Riker's body. She pushed her fingers deeper. And then she felt it. A thread. Not a bond, but something else. A tiny, thready pulse, deep, deep in the earth. It was weak, failing. It felt like she did. Lonely, cold, in pain. Live, she thought. Not in a command, but in a plea. Please, just live. She focused on it, pushing aside her own pain, the cold ache of the broken bond. She channeled the small, flickering warmth she had left, pushing it down her arms, through her fingers, and into the soil. It was like sinking her hands into a frozen heart. At first, there was nothing. Then a tingling started in her hands. The soil beneath her palms seemed to warm. She felt the tiny pulse in the earth give a weak, answering throb. It was a connection, a song. She felt the thirst of the roots, the ache of the compacted soil. She pushed more, and the pulse grew stronger, more confident. "What are you doing?" Finn's voice was sharp. Alara opened her eyes. The soil around her hands was darker. It looked richer, moist, and the pale, dying carrot tops had straightened, just a little. A faint, pale green vibrancy had returned to them. She dug her trowel into the earth, which was now soft, and pulled. A perfect, bright orange carrot, as long as her hand, came free. Finn stared, his one good eye wide. What did you do?" I don't know," Alara whispered, looking at her own hands in shock. "I just listened." Word of the miracle carrots spread through Grimmire by nightfall. It was a small thing, but in a place of starvation and shadows, it was everything. By the time Alara limped back to Leva's cavern, her spiritual wound aching from the effort, she was the subject of whispers. Riker was waiting for her, leaning against the cavern wall, arms crossed. Lena was bustling about, a rare, genuine smile on her face. "She did it, Alpha. She spoke to the land. Finn brought me 3 perfect carrots. 3. Riker's expression was intense. He pushed off the wall and grabbed Alara's hand, yanking her forward. He turned it over, examining her palm. Her fingers were caked with the rich, dark soil. "You felt it," he stated. I felt a pulse," Alara admitted. "It was weak. I just pushed." "She's a warden," Riker breathed, his gaze fixed on her face, a strange, wild light in his eyes. "I'll be damned. He threw away a warden." "A what?" Alara asked, pulling her hand back. "The old tales," Lena said, her voice filled with awe. "Before the Alphas became tyrants, before the packs became armies, there were wardens, shifters whose wolves were not for fighting, but for connecting. They were the healers of the land, the voice of the pack's territory. Without a warden, the land dies. The wolves weaken, the bonds fray." Ilara's blood turned to ice. "The Silvermoon lands, they've been struggling. The harvests are poor. The deer have moved on. And Kyle, in his infinite wisdom, rejects and exiles the one person who could save it," Riker finished, his voice a low, lethal vibration. "He thought you were weak because your wolf didn't want to snap and snarl. He didn't realize your wolf was holding the entire dying territory together with its bare hands. But I was rejected, Ilara said, the cold ache in her stomach intensifying. The bond is broken. I can't. I'm not his. No, Riker said, his voice dropping. You are not. He severed that. But the land still knows you. And he will realize what he's done. When the blight that infects my lands begins to creep into his, when his pack starts to starve, he will come looking for his lost little miracle. Ilara swayed. Hell force me to come back. He will, Riker said. His promise held the weight of mountains. Let him. He thinks this is a fortress of rock, but its true strength is its people. He cast us all out. Finn, Lena, the 100 others down here. All of us broken. All of us weak. He looked at her, his blue eyes seeming to see into the hollow space Kyle had left. He cast you out, Ilara, but he didn't throw you away. He threw you to me. A strange, fluttering warmth started in her chest. It was nothing like the explosive, demanding fire of the fated bond with Kyle. This was slow, a small, tentative ember. It terrified her. I'm not strong enough to fight him, she whispered. You don't have to be, Riker said. You just have to grow. The next few weeks were a blur. Ilara's life found a new, strange rhythm. She worked in the gardens from sunup, when the crystals brightened, to sundown, when they dimmed. Under her care, the dead soil of Grymire began to thrive. It wasn't just the carrots. She coaxed tenacious herbs from cracks in the rock, hardy fungi from the damp corners, and the potatoes she planted were flourishing. The gardens became the heart of the hold. Finn, no longer sneering, became her shadow, her guard, and her first true friend. He taught her how to set snares in the outer tunnels for cave-dwelling creatures, and she taught him how to listen to the stone. She was changing. The work was hard, and her body, once thin and frail, grew stronger, her muscles lean. But the biggest change was inside. The cold, aching void of the rejection was still there, a permanent scar. But it was no longer her center. Her power, the Warden's touch, was a new core. It was quiet, steady, and it belonged to her. She even found a new spring, a source of clean water, by following the song of the roots deep into an unexplored tunnel. And then there was Riker. He came to the gardens often, ostensibly to check the progress, but he watched her. He didn't speak much, but his presence was a constant, warm pressure at her back. He would ask blunt questions. The soil is damp. Is that you or the spring? Finn says you're eating. Good. One day, he found her staring at a blank wall of the cavern. What do you see? He asked. A place for berries, she murmured, tracing a crack in the stone. They want to grow here. He just grunted, but the next day, a team of exiles was there, building terraces into the rock. He was checking on her, not the plants. She saw him in the shadows during the communal meals, his gaze fixed on her, ensuring she ate, that no one bothered her. He was protective, but distant, as if afraid to get too close. The small ember of warmth she felt for him grew, but it was a painful, hesitant thing. She was a reject. He was an alpha. The chasm seemed too wide. One evening, she stayed late, trying to coax a patch of the struggling berry bushes she'd planted. She was exhausted, and the ache of the rejection, always worse when she was tired, made her wince. She sat back on her heels, rubbing her chest. She hadn't realized Riker was there until he spoke from the shadows. It still hurts. Ilara jumped. My lord, Riker. Yes, always. He crouched beside her, close enough that his knee brushed hers. Kyle is a butcher. A true mate bond is a living thing. He didn't just kill it, he left the corpse to rot inside you. His voice was low and held a cold fury that made her shiver. Why? Why do you hate him so much? Elara asked, her voice barely a whisper. He's your alpha. Riker's laugh was a sharp, bitter sound. He is an alpha. He is not mine. He picked up a clod of the rich earth she had just healed. My father was the alpha before him. Kyle is my half-brother, younger, weaker, but ambitious. His gaze grew distant. Our father wanted to forge an alliance with the Red Fang Pack. He ordered me to accept a political bond with their alpha's daughter. I refused. I told him the goddess chooses, not politicians. What happened? My father, arranged a hunting accident. The Red Fang Alpha's daughter was killed, and I was framed for it. My shadow powers, he said, and a wisp of pure darkness coiled around his fingers, made it easy to convince the pack I was unstable, cursed. Kyle, of course, was the first to demand my exile. My father agreed, and Kyle, the loyal son, was named heir. He took the Alpha ceremony the day after I was cast into the Blighted Lands. They murdered her. Elara was horrified, and blamed you. Welcome to the world of Alphas, little warden, Riker said, the shadow retreating. Power is the only currency. Love is a liability. He looked at her, his face half in shadow, his blue eye brilliant. He cast me out here to die, but he forgot. My mother was from these lands. This blight doesn't harm me, it obeys me. To prove his point, he held up his hand. The shadows in the corner of the garden stretched, moving like liquid, and coalesced in his palm, forming a silent, writhing sphere of pure night. They see this as a curse, a void, but it is just a part of the world, like your life force. They fear what they don't understand. He was so close. The pull she felt toward him, the slow, simmering warmth, intensified. It wasn't the fated bond. It was something else, something chosen. She was so tired of being cold. Before she could stop herself, she leaned forward, just an inch, and rested her head against his massive shoulder. He went utterly rigid, every muscle in his body locked. She tensed, ready to pull back, to apologize. "I'm sorry, His arm slowly, carefully moved. It was a monumental effort, as if he were fighting years of habit. He didn't wrap it around her. He just rested his hand on her back, his large, warm palm spread between her shoulder blades. It was a simple gesture of protection, of acceptance. "Don't be," he growled, his voice thick. After a long moment, he relaxed, letting out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a decade. "He will come for you, Elara," he murmured, his voice a low vibration against her hair. "The lands of Silvermoon are failing. I've had scouts at the border. The blight is spreading. His pack is hungry, and he knows why." Just that morning, a scout had returned, half dead, carried by his patrol. He'd been caught. Kyle hadn't killed him. He'd questioned him, using brutal alpha compulsion, and had learned of a miracle worker in Grimmire. He'd sent the scout back with a message, carved into his chest. "She is mine." "What will you do?" Elara whispered, trembling. "He cast me out for a crime I did not commit." "He cast you out for a power he did not understand. This forbidden kingdom is built on his refuse. Let him come. Let him see what his trash has built." His hand tightened on her back, just for a second. "He will not have you." Elara closed her eyes, breathing in his scent of pine, shadow, and cold stone. For the first time in her entire life, she felt safe. The attack came 3 days later. It wasn't the subtle incursion Elara had feared. It was an invasion. A section of the cavern wall, one that led to an old, forgotten tunnel, exploded inward. Dust, rock, and the shouts of men filled the main hold. Ilara, who had been sorting herbs with Lena, was thrown to the ground. "To the gardens, now!" Lena shrieked, shoving her. But it was too late. Through the dust, backlit by the harsh glare of human-made floodlights, strode Alpha Kale. He was flanked by his two betas, Bryn and Marcus, and 30 of his elite Obsidian Guard, all in full combat gear. His aristocratic face was gaunt, his eyes burning with a feverish, desperate light. "Where is she?" he roared. His gaze found her. Ilara, covered in dust, clutching a bundle of herbs, frozen in terror. "There," he snarled, "the little witch." He started toward her, but a black-furred missile intercepted him. Riker, in his half-shifted form, claws extended, fangs bared, his eyes burning blue, slammed into Kale, sending him flying back into his guards. "You are not welcome here, brother," Riker bellowed, his voice a mixture of human and wolf. The cavern erupted. Finn and the other exiles, armed with sharpened rocks, salvaged metal, and their own feral courage, launched themselves at the Obsidian Guard. It was a brutal, desperate fight. The Guard were trained and armored, but Riker's people were fighting for their home, their only home. They used the tunnels, striking from the shadows, their feral howls mixing with the clanging of steel. "Ilara!" Kale screamed, scrambling to his feet, his face contorted in a mask of rage. "You are mine! The land is dying because of you! You will come back, and you will fix it!" He lunged for her, pushing Lena aside. Ilara scrambled back, but Bryn and Marcus flanked her, cutting off her escape. "Got the little rat," Bryn sneered, grabbing her arm, his fingers biting in like steel traps. "No!" Ilara screamed. She slammed her hands into his chest and pushed, not with her body, a futile gesture, but with her power. It wasn't the gentle, coaxing warmth of the gardens. It was a raw, terrified blast of life force. It was the anger of her humiliation, the pain of her exile, the fierce, protective love she felt for her new home. Bryn howled, staggering back, his hands smoking as if he'd touched a live wire. The warden's power, meant to heal, could also burn those with ill intent. She didn't stop. She pushed again, and vines of pure green energy, a visual manifestation of her power, erupted from the stone floor, wrapping around Bryn's legs and rooting him to the spot. Kale stopped, his eyes wide. "So, the little rat has teeth. Good, you'll need that fire." He took a step, his alpha aura pressing down on her, demanding submission. It was the same power that had forced her to her knees. The air grew heavy, thick, and it was hard to breathe. The old, broken bond flared with a sickening, cold familiarity. But this time, it was not the only thing inside her. The new, tentative ember of her connection to Riker, to Grimmire, to Finn and Lena flared brighter, a warm, defiant shield. "She is not yours!" Riker's voice cut through the den. He was bleeding from a cut on his arm, but had dispatched 2 guards, his shadow powers moving like whips, pulling them off balance. He stood between her and Kale, a black-furred wall of protective fury. "She belongs to no one, but she is under my protection." "Your protection?" Kale laughed, a high, unhinged sound. "You, the exiled murderer? This sewer? I am the true Alpha, and I am here to claim what is mine by the goddess's own law. She is my mate." "You rejected that law," Ilara's voice, small but clear, cut through the noise. She stepped out from behind Riker, her body trembling, but her gaze level. "You broke the bond. A mistake," Kael shouted. "One that will be rectified. We will perform the rite of cleansing. We will force the bond. The land demands it." "The land demands a warden," Ilara said, her voice gaining strength. "It does not demand you." The old, rotted tether of their broken bond pulsed, a sickening, cold pain. Kael felt it too. He smiled, a cruel, triumphant expression. "You feel that, don't you? It's still there. You are still mine. You can never be free. Come to me, Ilara. Be my Luna. Be my property. And I will let this pit of rogues live." This was the moment, the choice. Her old life of submission, or this new life of dirt and shadows. Riker stood beside her, bleeding for her. Finn, free from his fight, was limping toward her, his face a mask of loyal fury. Lena was pulling the wounded into her cavern. Ilara looked at Kael, at the man who had humiliated her, broken her, and now sought to use her. "The bond," she whispered, "is not a chain, Kael." She reached inside herself, finding the cold, dead, rotting thing he had left in her soul. She grabbed it. "It's a wound." Kael frowned, sensing the shift. "What are you doing?" "You taught me rejection," Ilara said, her voice dropping to a low, powerful calm. She met Riker's gaze, and in his eyes she found all the strength she needed. "Let me teach you severance." She closed her eyes and pulled. She channeled her power, the raw, green, living power of the entire cavern, of every root and every drop of water she had healed. The glowing crystals flared, the stone floor hummed, and a wind tore through the chamber. "Ilara, no!" Riker roared, sensing the raw power she was channeling. "It will kill you!" She poured that power into the dead bond. It was not a gentle healing. It was a cauterization, a forest fire. She was burning the infection out, burning the rot, burning him. Kael screamed. It was not a sound of pain, but of spiritual annihilation. He staggered back, clutching his chest, his eyes wide with disbelief. The phantom tether, the last thread that connected them, didn't just dissolve. It ignited, and the backlash slammed into him. The ground at his feet cracked. His alpha aura, his power, his very presence didn't just shatter. It was devoured by her warden's fire. He visibly aged, his strength draining from him like water from a sieve. The rejection sickness, the cold void she had carried for weeks, vanished. It left a scar, but it was a clean, pale scar, no longer an open, festering wound. After his initial agonizing scream, Kael fell to his knees, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked small, empty. "The bond is gone," Ilara stated. She was free. The Obsidian Guard froze, seeing their alpha on his knees, not to a stronger wolf, but to the wolfless Omega he had cast out. Their morale shattered. Finn, seeing his chance, rallied the exiles. "Drive them out," he roared, and the fight turned from a defense to a rout. The guard, now leaderless and terrified of Ilara's strange power, grabbed their fallen, empty alpha and dragged him back toward the tunnel, disappearing into the darkness. Silence fell in the cavern, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the panting of the fighters. Ilara stood, swaying, the expenditure of power having drained her. Her knees buckled. But this time she did not hit the floor. Riker caught her. He scooped her up, his one good arm holding her tight against his chest. "I told you he was a fool," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion, his heart hammering against her ear. He carried her to the center of the cavern, where his people, the rogues, the exiles, the broken, were gathering. They were bruised and bleeding, but they were victorious. They looked at her, not with suspicion or jealousy, but with awe. Fenn limped forward, his scarred face split in a grin, and bowed his head. Alpha, Luna. Ilara's head snapped up. "No, I'm not." "You are," Lena said, her voice firm as she came to stand beside them. "The fated bond is the goddess's suggestion. The chosen bond," she looked pointedly at Riker's arm, still clamped around Ilara, "is the wolf's decision." Riker's gaze met Ilara's. The slow burning ember she had felt for him, no longer suppressed by Kale's rotting bond, burst into a clean, steady, powerful flame. It was a bond, new and whole, clicking into place. It was not the agonizing, demanding fire of Kale's. It was a deep, resonant warmth, a feeling of rightness. Her wolf, silent for 19 years, finally stretched, woke, and purred in contentment. It felt like home. Riker's scarred face softened. "He humiliated you before his pack," he said, his voice loud enough for all his people to hear. "He brought you to your knees." He gently, slowly lowered her until her feet touched the stone floor. He did not let her go, but instead dropped to one knee before her. The Shadow Alpha, the exiled king, kneeling to the rejected Omega. A collective gasp echoed through the cavern. "In this kingdom, the Forbidden Kingdom," Riker said, his ice-blue eyes fixed on hers, "the strong do not rule. The loyal do. The healers do. The wardens do." He took her hand, the one caked in dirt and power, and pressed it to his lips. "He made you a casualty. I will make you a queen. My shadows will guard your light, if you will have them." Tears streamed down Ilara's face, washing away the dust and the pain. She looked at these people, the scarred, the broken, the unwanted, and she saw not a pit of rogues, but a pack. Her pack. She looked at Riker, the man who had seen her worth when she was nothing, and she saw not an exile, but an alpha. Her alpha. She pulled him to his feet, her hand in his, and stood beside him. "Then let us," she said, her voice ringing with a strength she never knew she possessed, "rebuild this kingdom, together." A roar of approval shook the very foundations of Grymire. The new normal was work, but it was a different kind of work. It was not the desperate scramble for survival. It was building. With Kyle's dark influence severed and his threat neutralized, Grymire began to change. The exiles, now with a true Luna, a warden, worked with a new purpose. Ilara, with Riker at her side, taught them how to feel the land, how to coax life from the stone. The gardens expanded, and for the first time in a decade, the blighted lands began to heal. The toxic metallic tang in the air receded, replaced by the scent of damp earth and new leaves. 2 weeks after the battle, a delegation appeared at the hidden entrance. Not warriors, but the old, the sick, and mothers with starving pups from the Silvermoon pack. Kale, a hollow shell, had been deposed, and the pack had collapsed into chaos. They were refugees. Riker's first instinct was to turn them away. His shadows coiled at his feet, his face a hard mask. One evening, Ilara stood with Riker on a high ledge overlooking the main cavern, watching the exiles share a true harvest feast. Roasted potatoes, mushroom stew, and even sweet berry tarts. The cavern was bright, not just with crystal light, but with laughter. "You're thinking of them," Riker said, his voice a low rumble. He didn't need to ask who. Their new bond was a quiet, constant connection. He knew her thoughts as his own. The refugees were still camped outside, cold and afraid. "They are starving," Ilara said, her voice soft. The ones he left behind. The ones who were too weak to run. They are not your people, Riker said, though his voice held no heat. They laughed at you. They watched you be thrown away. They did, Ilara agreed. They were weak, and they followed a cruel alpha. But a warden doesn't just heal the land, Riker. She heals the pack. Even the sick parts. He studied her, his love for her a tangible thing in his ice-blue eyes. You want to offer them sanctuary. I want to offer them a choice, Ilara corrected gently. The choice we never had. To come here, to Grimmire, to work, to heal, to be part of this. She walked to the entrance herself, Riker at her back, a silent, shadowy guardian. She stood before the refugees, who flinched, expecting judgment. He cast you out, she said, her voice echoing. We will take you in. But in Grimmire, there are no titles. There is no rank. There is only the pack. You will work, you will heal, and you will be loyal. This is the new law. Riker was silent for a long moment, watching the stunned, grateful refugees bow, not in fear, but in respect. This kingdom was built from exiles, he said finally, taking her hand. Who are we to turn others away? He smiled, a true, warm smile that lit his scarred face. My queen, always the healer. He stepped behind her, wrapping his strong arms around her waist, pulling her back against his solid chest. She leaned into his embrace, her hands covering his. They were both scarred, both exiles, both remade by their pain. It's not forbidden anymore, is it? She whispered, looking out over their thriving home, now filled with new, hopeful faces. No, Riker murmured, pressing his face into her hair. It's not forbidden. It's the future. He placed a hand on her stomach, where a new, tiny pulse of life, one that was a combination of shadow and earth, of alpha and warden, was just beginning to make itself known. It's our kingdom, Ilara, and you are its heart. Ilara closed her eyes, her wolf strong and awake, purring in contentment. Finally, truly, home.